at this time of year, perhaps in the last couple weeks, a few weeks to several weeks, rough period of time, you see another set of shifts starting to happen now. Today, early November 2025, I walked down the street somewhere around 6th Avenue in Midtown. There's a man handing out like little cards and flyers, things like that. And I was crossing the street, crossed it at the crosswalk, came onto the corner of the sidewalk, right where he was. He was very close. He was positioned right where there was foot traffic, so he was almost sticking it, his cards hanging out almost at right at people's ribs, pretty much like that. Like that tight area where people are coming through on both ways, always. As I passed through that spot where he was standing, as I was the body closest to him for that fraction of a second, then he stuck out his hand a little bit towards me. And, the angle wasn't quite perfect or whatever. He actually ended up, putting his thing on my, making contact with my ribs as I passed my jacket. But, I didn't slow down. I didn't take it from him, but, I kind of like half looked over at him a little bit for a split second, just to acknowledge he was there, right? And this guy, Hispanic guy, was possibly Mexican or whatever, but definitely a Hispanic guy. As he tapped me, he kind of moved his head, looked at me, and sometimes it's evident from how people react with their body language, whether they recognize me. But really, this guy, and this is still at this current frame in time, still somewhat relatively uncommon. Okay, that's just sort of why I'm bringing it up, because this is the first waves of the sporadic yet slow and steady bits of increase and increase and increase in the things and the energies and like this. I walk by, and he basically, in a sense, acknowledges me as soon as I passed him, right as he kind of tapped the flyer or whatever up against me, which wasn't taken. Probably as he touched me, he just looked up and realized who I was. And right out of his mouth, right a split second later, as I already started passing him, beyond him, from slightly over to my side, from behind me a little bit, and I hear him go, he said, "Find it. Find it. I love you. I love you." And he repeated it, and I was walking a little bit slow, and within that space, for several seconds, I well heard what he was saying, because he was prominently speaking out at me. It remained audible. He was projecting at me. "Find it. Find it. I love you. Find it." Incredible stuff. What's even more incredible is that about a couple or so weeks ago, as a second sort of significant mention of that prior thing being the first, now which happened earlier in the last several hours or so, the second thing that happened a couple weeks ago, also very significant, substantially significant, actually, if you really think about it. I was probably a couple or so blocks away from where I was when, or this particular guy here in this interaction. For well over a year, as a growing number of people on this planet are aware, have become more and more aware, underground gossip and rumors have been spreading. A significant proportion of people within various communities, actually, not just the Jewish community, but a lot of secular people, a lot of secular Jews, and a lot of just regular people have heard about me too. Not just the broad, general, pre-existing whole reputation and all that, but regarding messianic potentiality and implications This, of course, is basically the news reporting. For those who don't know, that's what's been going on. Like word on the street kind of deal, and across social media, and the kind of more hidden pockets here and there. Maybe not so hidden, and yet not fully revealed. It's very interesting. Continues, it's one of those if you know, you know kind of deals. It's still at that level, right? And had an AI comment about that, do probabilistic forecasting, I think from Anthropic's Claude months ago about this. I may or may not have featured that within conversations thus far featured on my channel from months ago, but I do remember, likely I think I did feature it already. It said, it gave a probabilistic timeline of what would happen. And it was a little bit slower than what I would have assumed at the regular, but it ended up being right. It's taking exactly as about as slow and steady as what the thing predicted, which is unbelievable. And I started to say, yeah, it said by late 2025 is when it will start slowly upshifting in a way, and it's kind of what I'm seeing now. What happened? The recognition of a messianic king is something that's prophesied, something that ultimately will engulf the entire world and essentially bring the entire world into a king and subject kind of relationship, to say at the very least, in essence. But before any of that even begins, no one alive on earth is explicitly or even implicitly subjugated to that one. Really, the closest thing we have to that is, we can, at some aspect of analysis, consider it as a believed Messiah, pre-Messiah, first coming of the Messiah, depending, of course, on obviously we're talking about the Christian tradition, depending on what your belief lens is regarding these things. The figure of Jesus is outside of the Jewish religion, it's pretty much secular and Christian-wise, the strongest active avatar as a concept that serves as the placeholder around which people bring in their energy. And explicitly, if you come to the Christianity or Catholicism or whatever, you enter into a spiritual form, for whatever it is. It's not literal. See, and that's the key thing, though. But a spiritual, figurative sort of quasi-similar relationship where believers and followers of, as we call Christ, it literally means just Messiah, anointed in Greek. But Jesus, Yeshu specifically, it's as if they are subjects, so to speak, of what Jesus is held to be. But at no point, apart from when even Jesus was walking on this earth, where he had a few, a group even of people who literally related to him while he was alive, in that, continuing, and apart from those groups, there's no real manifestation of kingship and of the king to subject relationship, except for the kings of the earth, purely speaking. We haven't seen pharaonic and divine status, or quasi-divine, basically, right? Status of kingship as a model on this earth. I don't believe we've had a prominent representation of that, by belief, by participation. Whether or not it's true, different, obviously traditions have different interpretations of that, of what is right or what should be believed or not believed. Probably since the pharaohs and Jesus, we didn't really have a strong representation of that. I don't know whether in the prior millennia before this one, or the prior one, whether there was some, representations of that quasi-divine in earlier China or early Asia, something like this, maybe not really. Eventually you have the Christian kings come up in Europe, and that was sort of the West sprouted out through that and all that. So what do we have today? We understand prophetically that we're coming into that period of time where, regardless of who I am and whatever, but just from a purely analytic kind of narrative, as we analyze the circumstance as it's expected to be, you can consider it and say, whoever that guy is, once he shows up and it begins, okay, and he's really the guy. Okay, so for that guy, it's guaranteed by prophecy and by God, by truth, consistent with it. You will begin to see the first waves where it isn't anymore just people out of sight or at a distance murmuring across each other. And we've seen that, and I've seen that too. Oh, Mashiach, 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 right? That's still standing on the sidelines and looking and gawking. It's not creating an actual true interaction space in the fullest sense, even if it's tacit or substantive. Eventually, what naturally must take place in the course of that story is that you are going to experience that Messiah, whoever he is going to naturally experience the first indication of acknowledgement being made, whether formally or probably more likely substantively in any sense, really acknowledgement made of that person as king, as sovereign. Naturally, if such a thing is made, an acknowledgement like this is made, stated, formally shown, telegraphed, whatever it is, beyond just the fact of underground, not quite as much underground rumors by now going around, likely it's going to be someone who is Jewish. Although, now that I think about it, just into my memory came something else that happened. This was, now it's November now. This still feels like yesterday. This was around late August. Perhaps the late August event was as a precursor for what I'm about to state now. So I'll cover both stories. The one in late August is almost, it was harder to describe. It had almost like a truly like a spiritual, dimensional, quote unquote magical, almost sort of strange ethereal quality to it, the way it came through. It's almost off for me to even make a casual language-based, word-based telling, like, oh, let me just tell you about how that happened. See, it would be strangely somehow almost falling short unless I do a damn good job. And hey, I certainly do have some kind of speech impediment from time to time. Whatever, I'm not gonna, okay. All the Mashiachs have them. Yeah, I've got a speech impediment, whatever it is. Well, we continue. Let me turn my attention now to what I was saying. A couple weeks ago, about, also in Midtown, I was walking down, a little bit in my own world, kind of processing all the, one can imagine what kinds of things are going on in my head. Whatever. And yet, maybe it's not that different from what some people have going on in their heads. It's a little different, quite different, and not that different. See, all at once. I'm bustling down. I'm actually moving very fast at this particular moment through this scene right there on the street, also coming through the corner, approaching it close, coming close to 7th Avenue. And just before I got to the intersection, about a couple people around, one of them turned suddenly as I also was approaching towards him. He looked at me just with his like face like awestruck momentarily, just seeing me, and I'm moving quickly towards him. And since I kind of move quite damn quick when I move around in public quick, it can just stun people a little bit. When he saw me, and the read I got on him, secular Jewish guy, maybe slightly older than me at least, but shorter, professional guy, had like a dress shirt on. They had the look, virtually totally obvious it was a Jewish, secular kind of guy. Probably secular. Anything's possible. But after about a moment of him seeing me and processing that it was me that was coming towards him, I saw this guy, and I wasn't looking right at him, so I didn't. He's there because I'm noticing him as part of everything going on. But he decided to initiate and do something that I haven't seen before prior to that. I had not ever seen this. This was never done. And I didn't think about this kind of thing being done. It's not on my mind really in that sense. So I experienced and beheld something that to me was as shocking almost, and how surprising it was. He adjusted himself, and I'm extremely good at watching people and they're seeing their body language for what it is, one can imagine. He, with intentionality, seeing that I was passing through, probably him reading that, I wasn't going to slow down, and that it was going to be about a moment and a half of me being right by him within, or in each other's view, but until I just barrel past him and continue kind of treading along. He adjusted himself, squared face with me, and then he proceeded to overtly do something that people, ladies and gentlemen, where we are here in New York, in America, in the United States, with our history and everything, or that Americanism is all about, and the foundations of it, and the philosophy behind our society here. He did something that we do not ever see happen here. If you saw something happen that doesn't normally happen, it stands out, one could figure and say, right? It's noticeable. We know what it is, but it's something you see on TV. You never really see it authentically done. If you really are in a position to ever witness this happen, you're just, it's such a rare sight. And what is this that I'm talking about? He did something. He bowed. And it's a very specific kind of bow. Make no mistake. You had to have been there to really see it and fully get it and appreciate it for what it was. He bowed. Stranger I never saw in my life. And he did it, which is really the amazing thing, because of how quick and sudden all of this happened. He did this reflexively, almost reflexively, like quasi-reflexively, in that he knew he had just that moment to decide, and given who he was, what his belief system is, what he understands or feels is true. People, in this country, you have never seen, unless the King of England is visiting and he's standing in public, and people are knowing to bow and curtsy. It's a specific bow and curtsy you do to someone who's a sovereign, and royals generally, especially to the sovereign, the crown of any sovereign in the world, gets this treatment. Of course, that's the commonality. But we forget that in America. Again, you turn on YouTube and television, you'll see it. Historically, here, perhaps as late as mid-century, still we still had an appreciation of that. I think Queen Elizabeth was seen coming over, visiting America sometimes, or others or celebrities would visit. You'd see Marilyn Monroe knowing how to curtsy to Queen Elizabeth and like this. And to note also, there's two different kinds of bowing that take place in life. One is a theatrical bow, but the theatrical bow is distinctly different from the regal bow, from the royal bow. If you're acknowledging a sovereign, there's a very specific, reflexive look. And probably that guy he must have been at least a little bit older than me, I think. Probably he's among the youngest who would even have the subconscious programming to know to do that quick if you're just a regular guy in society today. I don't think a 20, 25-year-old even would think to do that out of their reflex. Very interesting thing. But he made this acknowledgement. And he made it clear in his body language that this is what he was doing too, but not over dramatic. It was not a theatrical bow. It's less than that. But when you do it that way, and he threw his head and neck down while standing up stiff, rigid otherwise, and a slight forward leaning of the torso, but barely, almost imperceptible, just slightly, with the head and neck thrown forward, deep down, and then thrown right back up. And continued to face me and watch me as I moved by. And as I caught that, was right when I was moving by, and as it just kind of registered, and as I'm seeing it complete as I'm moving past him, and I just go, huh, oh my God, to myself. Is that what I think it was? And yeah, it definitely was. Unbelievable. I'm just telling you, not much happened afterwards. I continued barreling down. He watched me for a moment as I walked on. You know, through almost imperceptible body language, I kind of just vibed off the fact that I acknowledged that he stood there and showed and presented himself this way. The slightest kind of angling and turn of my head with my eye out for a moment out. But also, even in this, the way I move in this world is largely incognito, and I'm still in that covered sense, in some sense. This moment was the first expressed acknowledgement, subtly made. I don't know if you'd call it tacit. It's formally, overtly, expressly bowed this man, but this is the first interactional acknowledgement that any human being has made directly to me, positioning himself in this manner. This is acknowledging the sovereignty of another. Remember, we don't have sovereignty in that fullest sense in the United States. We don't have kings, right? Unless you're a visiting king from somewhere else. This is serious stuff. And it's worthy to make a story about this and to tell it what happened. There's so many things that happen every day. Every day. The amount of stories that go on around me that I see really a lot that I'm involved with, people don't know 98% of it or more. Probably this whole filled, almost books with whatever. And maybe I'll tell. I'm not quite in that energetic frame space to do the story justice of what happened about a couple months or so, late August. Because there also then was an acknowledgement made. And this time not from a Jewish person. This was a black young woman. Christian orientation, do you see? And yet from that slightly different lens, still made a slightly different form of acknowledgement in public, within that space, that confined space of that Whole Food seating area I was in on that day. I'll never forget that. They too, from that branch of the tradition, make that acknowledgement as well. I'll share the very specifics of that maybe in another part, in another place somewhere. Very slowly but surely, things are being moved along here on this realm. God's will be done, people.
Family's official website, there are no obligatory codes of behaviour when meeting the sovereign or any other royal family members. However, people may still wish to observe the traditional forms. For men, this means a neck bow or bowing the head only, while women traditionally curtsy. Others can also show respect by simply shaking hands.
Seeing stuff.
Former royal butler Grant Harold has helped many a guest make a good first impression when coming face to face with royalty. Here's his advice on how to perfect the bow and curtsy for that once-in-a-lifetime moment.
If you watch any kind of old movies, you'll see that the gentlemen used to do a bow from the waist and the ladies would do the curtsy. And when it comes to the royal family, for a man, he wouldn't do a bow from the waist any longer because that's classed as a theatrical bow, which you see performers do. But if I met a royal and I was going to acknowledge them, all I do is my hands go to the side, feet together, and just nod my head, as simple as that. I think if you were to suddenly kind of do a theatrical bow, it can be a little bit much, can't it? For a lady, it's a little bit more tricky because obviously it comes down to balance. So I have said to ladies that if you're uncomfortable doing a curtsy, of course you can do the neck bow. But if you want to try the curtsy, then it's hands to the side, right foot behind the left. If that is your stronger leg, obviously it depends on what you're comfortable with. And then you do a little bob down and back up. That is as much as that. What you don't do is don't try to do this because you can look like a Boeing 747. And the other thing that can go wrong is if you try to go too low, you could end up going right down and you're not going to come back up.
Even the king seemed caught off guard. It wasn't dramatic, yet it carried weight far beyond his age and left an impression that couldn't be ignored. What happened in that brief moment that has everyone talking? Join us as we explore how Prince Louis changed the course of a royal appearance with a single gesture. The weight of royal titles. At just 7 years old, in a moment that caught everyone's attention, Prince Louis did what few could have predicted. Everyone noticed as he bowed his head deliberately and respectfully. What struck people most wasn't just the gesture, but how natural it seemed coming from him. Even King Charles paused. For a child known mostly for mischief and charm, it was a reminder that Prince Louis carries a title rooted in royal law, family legacy, and careful planning.
Says something interesting or make one finding. You could consider that in the current circumstance and space of things, if through my public moving around eventually as I am, I eventually come across a first person who makes an overt, essentially largely explicit acknowledgement in this way. That means he's not even though he's the only one I've seen now thus far to make a showing at that level, or in that way, he's not the only one existing on Earth who would be inclined to do this. Do you see what I'm saying? That population pool is larger than one by count. It's worthy to note also that, given basically how I am, how I come across and appear, and all the things that come around me, my reputation precedes me in the various aspects and ways that it does, most unique as it is entirely. Hardly anything truer on earth that could be said than that. But it's largely because of that kind of energy that comes around me that I carry as I move around and go, and with everything else. Many or most, even nearly all of the people that may have some significant potentiality to, they possess that kind of regard, mind frame, relationship casting, or whatever else, and belief and feeling and how they order the things from their world into our world, with respect to all of us and with respect to me. But most of them then have significant inhibition from going about doing that. Many or most people who could conceivably otherwise have that potentiality is not fully realized. That one man who did that had an exceptional level of a kind of bravery almost, or courage, if you really think about it, to show that, to do that. He didn't do it in front of anyone else for anyone else. Not for in front of cameras or in front of the groups that should be observed or seen. Just for me that I'm shown this. It's interesting. Many would figure probably that it's likely to only go up from here. They may not be wrong. Maybe I'll add one more thing too. So most people don't realize, almost everyone probably underappreciates the level of continued ironic isolation, functionally, practically, etc., that I'm dealing with. You see, it's essentially enabled that it's kept like that and almost stunningly prolonged like that. It has its karmic spiritual advantages, and reverso in the physical, it's a physical seeming disadvantage. But remember, the spirit governs the physical, so eventually and ultimately it's God's will, as we can state, basically, essentially, entirely. One more. You can then say that, well, all right, if I'm still a person that's going around and I'm still in that circumstance where I'm in want, actually, yes, in want of that first set of bridges, people who are subjects or as subjects, genuinely, you see, to carry out the will, basically. Amazing. And couldn't have that been a potential opportunity? There's a guy outright bowing to you. Not in that corny theatrical sense, but it's a slightly different one that's for the true royal sovereign bowing. I happened to continue, literally was pure momentum that had me continue to barrel past, and I wasn't going to be someone who, out of that spirit of mine, well, to stop, I'm going to go back around, and that's not going to, it wasn't in the ingraining of the natural course graining of that situation. I continued on just appreciating that this happened. This is that man, and this is God through that man showing and demonstrating this is what's happening now. One may conceivably ask, say, yeah, well, if you were standing around still, kind of posted at a corner or somewhere in public, and someone comes up to you, and with, people avert awkwardness in today's world. Okay, you notice that. People notice that, for example, women start much fewer conversations nowadays than even before a few years ago. I think we're all noticing that. It's not just me, I don't think. Even despite, and I've talked to other men about this recently, actually about this in public, even though they seem to have ironically, a higher interest level in men nowadays than ever before. See, ironically, higher interest, but there's more something else. It's a strangely but interestingly sort of fitting irony. Those of us who feel it, as Mark could say on that maybe for another video. Meanwhile, with this, so people avoid awkwardness, whatever it is, the newer instinct. We're constantly evolving and changing how we are culturally, socially. These are new facets of our grand social programming. These are emergent features. So people don't run up to you to do something like that. Almost with what happened with that guy, it had to have been with me passing by and showing like I probably wasn't going to slow down, yet he was enthralled for that moment. If I'd just been standing there, he wouldn't have stopped, faced me squarely, two men still, and he's going to do that. That's too much, you see? So, I mean, man's nature and woman's nature, people's nature is not really to do that, to expose themselves to that, because whatever they think of me, still they can't handle it. It's still too much psychological, physiological, sparks. It's too much, right? They kind of just look from behind their masks, their shields, their frames like that. But then the question is posed, if I'm somewhere and there's an even more kind of still, non-transiently made acknowledgement that's squarely done, what then? Oh, you don't know. I don't really think about this so much. What goes is what goes. It's basically been the deal and the policy ever since all the things that have happened with me, and all like that, I could say for now. Ultimately, of course, this is a noteworthy occurrence. One genuinely occurring, genuinely being made here on this earth in that manner, with everything else around it circumstantially within the real life context of what's really happening. It is noteworthy indeed, which is why I'm making this as a kind of note or update, slight sort of video. The fact that this is happening is reality. It's not just my reality and that guy's reality. This is a reality of what is happening on this earth right now. This is a reality that genuinely, with fullest insight, is pertinent to everyone alive on earth. So for anyone as a listener here or anywhere else to come across this with understanding or awareness that this is what's happening, that it is happening as a kind of news sort of report again, being made here and conveyed. The implications that this really is going on and that this is reality are pretty much almost beyond words. This is reality, people. Whether you like it or not, wake up. This isn't a pretend land anymore. Not that it ever was. Wake up. Look. Good morning. This is reality now. Given that this is what's happening in reality, what are you going to do about it? How will you position yourself to continue to participate within reality? By what manner and means?
The pomp and ceremony of the coronation of King Charles III and Queen Camilla was astonishing. 9,000 troops were involved in the procession. The extravagance of this affair cost more than $125 million. The King and Queen were taken to Westminster Abbey, not on the gold stagecoach, which was worth only $2.5 million. That wasn't too comfortable anyway. But rather on the Diamond Jubilee stagecoach, worth upward of $4 million. Charles was coronated with the St. Edward's crown. That crown weighs 5 pounds. It's made of 22 karat gold. It's worth $57 million. It has 444 gemstones, 345 rose-cut aquamarines, 37 white topazes, 27 tourmalines, 12 rubies, 7 amethysts, 6 sapphires, 2 jargoons, 1 garnet, and 1 carbuncle. He was presented with the sovereign scepter, a gold rod featuring the Cullinan 1 diamond, the largest clear-cut diamond in the world. It has 33 additional diamonds, 15 emeralds, 7 sapphires, and other gems, worth $400 million. He was given the sovereign orb, a hollow sphere with a band of gemstones, worth $2.5 million. He was given the sovereign ring that has sapphire, rubies, diamonds, worth 350,000 pounds. And he was clothed. He donned the robe of state, worth 37,000 pounds. And what does this have to do with the Jewish people? This was a very important event. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Brachos on Daf Tesamid Beis, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, La'olam yishtadel adam larotz likras malchei Yisrael. One should run to see Jewish kings. V'lo likras malchei Yisrael, but not only Jewish kings, ela afilu likras malchei Yaakov, even to see Gentile kings. She'im yizkeh, because if we will merit to be around in the times of Moshiach, yavchen bein malchei Yisrael and malchei Yaakov, we will be able to see the distinction between the Gentile kings and King Moshiach. Because the majesty and the sovereignty and the grandeur of the Melech HaMashiach and the grandeur and the majesty of all of Israel, of all of the Jewish people, will be far greater, far more magnificent than the grandeur of any Gentile king. So, we wish King Charles happiness and health in his reign, but he should serve as a paradigm to help us extrapolate that if this is the majesty of the reign of the Gentile kings, then this will inspire us to yearn for the Melech HaMashiach, whose grandeur, whose majesty, whose pomp and ceremony will be far greater, reflecting the greatness of the Jewish people in the coming of the Mashiach. And when we say every Friday night, Isna'ari me'afar kumi, shake yourself off from the dust, Livshi bigdei sefar techami, don the majestic clothing of your people. Al yad ben Yishai beis halachmi, through the coming of Moshiach. Let us yearn for the coming of the Melech HaMashiach, Sheyavoi, b'mhera v'yameinu. Amen.
Why? Finally. And why? Context and morality, moral context. This is going to be the ultimate final parser and final setter apart. Now, do you see what I'm saying? This is the final one of this age and for this coming age, my God. So, the way every single one of you proceed now will be the most important decision you will ever make. This is reality.
Turn on the news. Wait, actually, probably don't turn on the news. The world is, well, challenging. It's confusing and it's messy. And I don't just mean in ways that show up in the headlines. Illness, poverty, war, hangnails, mosquitoes. There's a lot of things, big and small, that we would change about our world if we could just snap our fingers. But most of those problems are not new. There's a cosmic imperfection that God built into the universe. And that's because God wanted each of us to be a part of the grand solution. That solution has been a cornerstone of the Jewish faith from the very beginning. Ever since biblical times, God has been telling us about what this world could be and what it someday will be. It's called the Geula, the redemption, the end of all war, suffering, and strife. And the person who's going to shepherd the world into that era is known as Moshiach. Everything we know about the Geula and Moshiach comes from biblical prophecies and traditional texts. It's a lot to study through, but here are some of the most important things you need to know. For starters, Moshiach will be a great Jewish leader and Torah scholar. He'll inspire all Jewish people to follow the Torah. He'll rebuild the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, bring all Jews back to the Holy Land, restore all 613 mitzvahs, even the ones we haven't been able to do for thousands of years, and teach the whole world about God. There will be no war, hunger, or competition. All nations will live side by side and worship one God in perfect harmony. As a grand finale, God will remove all evil from the earth and revive the dead, even putting an end to death itself. Overall, it'll be a global period of abundance where we'll all have plenty of time to focus on what's really important, knowing God and His wisdom. Now, as wild and miraculous as this all may sound, many of these big changes can happen naturally. Let me explain. Think of the future world of Geula as mostly similar to the world today, with one subtle but magnificent difference: the immersive awareness of God's presence. In today's world, we can misbehave. We can get confused, but that's only because God is hidden. Even though He's everywhere, in everything, we don't fully sense His presence. It's been that way since day one. But as soon as we become hyper-aware of God's light, the right path in life will become obvious, and the wrong path won't attract us so much. We'll only see the godly side of things with complete spiritual intuition. When the nations are able to intuit that we're all created in the image of God, the differences that separate us today will become as irrelevant as the missiles we use to enforce those differences. And Moshiach, he doesn't even need to perform any miracles. His most important job is to be the world's greatest Torah teacher, who makes all of humanity just get it, spreading divine clarity across the earth like water covers the sea, and giving us the spiritual equipment to dive beneath the surface. The Hebrew words for exile and redemption are almost identical. If you look carefully, you'll notice that the only difference is this single letter, Aleph, representing God's unity and omnipresence. All it takes is that tiny change, a single spark of divine mindfulness, to effect a complete transformation from exile to redemption.
He says the Aleph is the symbol of Mashiach. Remember, Hakaton, the little one who becomes 1,000. That's Mashiach. So the Aleph represents Mashiach. And what is an Aleph? An Aleph is a Vav and a Yud and a Yud, right? A Vav is just, an Aleph is a Vav with a Yud and a Yud. The upper Yud is the upper worlds, the lower Yud is the lower worlds, and the Vav, a Vav is literally a hook. Vav means a hook, right? So this is connecting, hooking together the heavens and the earth. That's the Aleph. It's one. And then Megaleh Amukot says this is the symbol of Mashiach, who is both the upper worlds and the lower worlds. The upper Yud is Mashiach ben David, the lower Yud is Mashiach ben Yosef, and the Ben Ish Chai quotes it exactly like that as well over there. It says it's one person.
So all opposites merge, because when things come in a defined level, on the level of Giluyim, you don't see how they come directly from the Eibishter himself. Each thing is defined. Each thing is the opposite of something else. But in the Eibishter himself, Yichol is one thing. His ability to illuminate it, to conceal, is completely one. So when that is revealed, by Mashiach will be revealed that level. So that means that by Mashiach, the Maila and the Mata, what we have today is the higher worlds and lower worlds. The higher worlds come because the Eibishter is revealed there. The lower worlds come because their godliness is concealed. But when the level of Yechelos Ha'atzmus, the power of revelation and concealment is revealed, at that level they're all one. The highest worlds and the lower worlds become one. So since by Mashiach himself, the Maila and the Mata by Mashiach will be completely one, so therefore he'll affect the world at large as well.
While Jews have hoped and prayed for this day for as long as we can remember, the Rebbe taught that it's time to be proactive. We can hasten the Geula. We can even demand it. And most importantly, we can live it, even before it happens. Every time you do a mitzvah, making yourself mindful of God's light and oneness, you are infusing yourself with a Geula mindset. Every word of Torah you study is a taste of Mashiach's times, when we'll engage with divine wisdom all day. When you teach your fellow humans about God, you are paving the way for Mashiach. The world, with all its problems, is closer to Mashiach than it has ever been. Many implements of war have already morphed into tools of good. In fact, the very same internet that enables you to watch this video was originally created for war. But today, it's a remarkable tool for sharing God's wisdom across oceans. In the Rebbe's words, Mashiach is ready to come now. It's up to us to do one more act of goodness and kindness to make it happen.
He fights the wars of God. So again, the Rambam has like a singular Messiah. There's no warrior Mashiach ben Yosef and then Mashiach ben David. It's one person who fights the wars of God, like King David fought the wars. This person is the presumptive Messiah. It's one person. So then we know that person's Mashiach bevadai. And then he will fix the whole world and establish for the whole world to worship the one true God, to make the whole world monotheistic.